Hi, and thank you all for joining us today. We are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 on the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM in New Orleans. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome to our Friday show. And as you know, we have two podcasts a week. One is on Thursday, and that is live at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the other one airs on Fridays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that one is pre-recorded for folks that either can't make the live, maybe they live in a different country. So we try to make it a little convenient for them. And that's why we have our Friday show. But thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to Ethereal Encounters Unveiled. And today, of course, we're broadcasting on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, which is 105.3 on the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM in beautiful New Orleans. Of course, you can leave any comments below, and I'm sure that our wonderful guests today will be able to get to any of your questions. So when we air on Fridays, I'm always in the chat, so feel free to pop in. Today, we have a truly fascinating and profound discussion lined up. We're incredibly honored to be joined by a remarkable individual by the name of Brandon Martin. He is the visionary behind S.E.E.D Truth Academy YouTube channel. And of course, you can find that. I will have all the links to where you can find Brandon's work. And there's a link tree running across the screen in the ticker below. Shortly, you'll see that as well. Brandon's work delves into the deeper currents that shape our reality. And today we're going to explore a topic that promises to unravel some of the most intricate layers of human experience and universal principles. And the topic is called the Tapestry of Existence, Natural Law, Symbols, and the Occult Arts. And we're going to hopefully tie them all together for you so that you can gain a good understanding. Of course, this isn't about abstract concepts. It's about understanding the fundamental threads that we weave through our lives, from the unseen forces that govern the cosmos to the hidden meanings. Oh, there's a little gnat flying in front of me. Sorry. From the cosmos to the hidden meanings embedded in the symbols that we encounter daily, and the ancient wisdom traditions that are often misunderstood. And we will be exploring how these elements interconnect, influence our consciousness, and ultimately shape our journey through existence. So Brandon, here we go. Let me get you on stage. Thank you so much for joining us today, Brandon.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here with you. And thank you for having me on. This is a great opportunity for me to share some of this deeper research that I've been doing for probably the past 20 to 25 years now.
Wow.
And I want to bring this to all the people that I possibly can. It comes straight from my heart and soul to try to help any individual who is on this journey of self-discovery and to understand nature itself.
Oh, wonderful. Yes, thrilled to have you here. And, I have a lot of questions lined up for you, but before we dig into them, I'm going to step aside for a minute, and you have a quite impressive background and bio. So take a minute or two and just explain who you are and your life's work, and I will pop back in with some questions.
Yeah, no problem. My name is Brandon Martin, and I actually grew up in the underground punk scene and skateboarding scene. My father founded a place called Skatopia, which became a haven for individuals trying to escape the oppressive system, specifically that of the state and government, usually circling around the building codes, because we just wanted to be able to build our own skate parks without having any kind of regulatory agencies coming in to harass us and prevent us from what we're doing with our own autonomy when we're not doing any harm to society or other people. So he eventually made a place called Skatopia, and I grew up there. And he was a very profound individual in his younger years, and he had a very strict curriculum of of literature that I had to read. So I grew up reading things like 1984, A Brave New World, Animal Farm, and I also had access to a great selection of occult literature as well. People such as Manly P. Hall stick out to me the most. And so I grew up on a farm reading, reading, reading. So I was very autodidactic, and eventually this took me on my own spiritual path. And I ended up running into many different researchers. David Icke is one of them, Michael Tessarion. Watched the documentaries such as Kymatica, Esoteric Agenda, things along that line back in the 2010s, 2012s. And then eventually came across an individual known as Mark Passio and got connected with him with his conference that he was doing. And then I, over time, started my own conference to try to get this information out to the people, specifically information that we're going to discuss today, actually. So I started a conference called the S.E.E.D Conference and started educating people and became very activated. The first one started in, 2014-ish, 2015, and it's been going on since then. And I am very blessed and very thankful for all the people who have come together to help maintain and continue that conference and bring people together from all over the world to speak on critical topics. And really, there's no taboo topic at the conference. We bring in a plethora of individuals with an eclectic background in many different research areas. So from there, I just kept building and building and building. And, now I'm working on my own book and, just still trying to do the work, which is called the magnum opus. And it's just a great work. That's why we're all here.
Wow. That's really impressive, I must say. Out of the gate, it sounds like you were very fortunate to have a dad that embedded your brain into such topics at an early age.
Yes, absolutely. It's one of the things that I always thank him for, was giving me the opportunity to have such a high level education, even though I was in a very, very poor community and came from a poor background, in fact, because we traveled all over the world, but we were just, couch surfing because he was a professional skateboarder. So I just went from couch to couch for a long time, but just going to skate parks and music shows and music venues and festivals. And through that, I became very multicultural. So I had a very unique perspective, very young, of the world and what was going on in the world. And he also was a very aware individual about what was taking place in the current geopolitical realm. And so, we always had different things to talk about, always things to improve upon and learn upon. And it was just quite an interesting journey for sure. Not many people kind of have that background. And if you look into Skatopia, you'll be like, oh, wow, it's pretty crazy.
Oh, I'm going to definitely check it out. Is he still with us today on this planet?
Yes, he is. He had a TBI, so he was a traumatic brain injury patient, and he has declined into borderline dementia now, but he's still functioning. He still runs Skatopia. I live pretty close to him, and we still put on our annual events every year, twice a year. We have, we've had big time shows such maybe people you're not familiar with, but big heavy metal and punk influences like Black Flag. Fish has played there. Guar has played there.
Oh, my daughter's a fish. My daughter's a fish head.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, there you go.
She follows them everywhere. So
yeah. So we've had I think at least 3,500 bands play. And that was just in my backyard, so I grew up in the music scene specifically. And then I was a professional skateboarder for a time period as well.
Wow. Then you have had some blessed life, it sounds, and you still do. I'm so fascinated. That's why I was so excited to get a chance to speak with you. So I want to ask you, though, how did your mom feel? Was she in your life, and was she a part of this ideology or this way of thinking?
She was in my life for the first couple years. She eventually reverted to drug addiction and then came into my life later on. But yes, in fact, she was a very spiritual person. But if there was somebody to pinpoint that was a huge influence on my spiritual journey, it would be my grandmother. She was there for me my entire life, and she was pointing me in the direction of people like Wayne Dyer, Eckhart Tolle,
Oh yeah,
the Eastern traditions
sure.
specifically. So,
Yeah, wonderful. Well, we'll get into what you're writing your book about later. But let's get started on natural law because I myself am not that well versed in the topic. So maybe you could give us a good overview of what that is so folks that are listening can kind of get a good footing on what we're talking about today.
absolutely. A lot of people confuse the term natural law with things like Darwinian macroevolution, things like the natural order, because we hear this term natural and we immediately think of the realm of science. And it is a science, but it's a little deeper than that. Originally, the word natural comes from the Egyptian word necher. And that also can be pronounced necheru as well. And what it originally meant was God. And so natural actually is this idea, or nature itself is this idea of something coming from the divine world, the unseen realm. So
Mhm.
natural law itself, I'll give you a working definition to work from that etymological breakdown there. It is a set of universal, inherent, objective, non-man-made, and eternal binding conditions which govern the consequences of the outcomes for beings with the capacity for holistic intelligence. And what I mean by holistic intelligence is the ability to understand the difference between a violent action that, let's say, usurps or destroys another person's autonomy and liberty and freedom, and a non-violent action. So simply morality. You have the ability to understand and live in harmony with a universal idea of morality. So there is an antithetical idea to this universal code of morality, which is moral relativity or
Mhm.
amoralism, where people think that you just make up morals as you go. It's just all subjective. It doesn't really matter what's right and wrong. And this kind of epistemic ideology, this foundation of an axiom for your belief system, actually is very detrimental, because what happens is when you think that way, then you really have no means to justify any self-defense against anybody, because who gets to
Mhm.
decide whose morals is more,
Correct.
valuable and correct? And so we have to have some objective basis. And you'll understand this. We will universally say rape is immoral. And
Right.
so rape is a violation of natural law because it violates based upon the consequences that take place of harm another sentient being and their autonomy and their right to choose. It's a coercive action. So natural law is simply this condition that we all look at, we all can see, and we can all repeat it over and over and over. So it is a science that you can discover and live in harmony with it.
Wow, that was a good breakdown. So I've heard a lot of atheists claim to be like followers of natural law,
Mhm.
um, because they're not particularly religious, but they do have a very some of them, of course, not all of them, but I think it's fair to say the majority of them would have a very strict moral code, a very stringent moral fiber that they live by. Now, who gets to determine what these laws are? Like, is there a father of natural law that set these parameters, hundreds of years ago? Or so where did it evolve from, the principle?
Right. I would say that it's an inherent emergent property of the universe itself, just like any other law. You could look at that, like I stated earlier, as God's law. You could call it karma. And the atheist and philosophical minded might call it consequentialism, where you're looking at the effect and saying, okay, this is wrong because this effect has taken place, right?
Mm,
It's been called universal law. It's been called many, many different things. So yes, you can be an atheist and align with an objective moral code, but no individual themselves gets to have the authority over that. The authority itself is the objective truth of what's taking place, what's
gotcha.
actually manifesting in reality. So if I do an action, it's not up to me whether that action is harmful. It's up to the consequences, to the effect from the cause. So I cause the action, and then the effect is either moral or immoral. And we observe it and discover it. That's why I specifically say we can discover that just like any other law in creation. And we discover that by the measurable effects of, the outcomes, right? So just like gravity, it's an unseen force that we measure based upon its outcome, based upon its effects.
When was it first, like, I don't want to say discovered, but who started like bringing this into awareness? Was there one particular philosopher or anybody hundreds of years ago? Is that your little doggy barking?
Yeah, that's my husky.
Yeah,
I
I
can put
have
her in.
one too.
Oh,
Don't
you have
worry.
huskies?
No, I have a dog. I have a poodle, but
Okay.
he's a barker, so no worries.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I'm
she's
just kind of
funny.
curious, like, was it a
Mhm.
philosopher where this kind of sparked people's interest? Did somebody first speak about this, write about this? When did it kind of percolate into our awareness?
I believe that from my research, and I do a lot of research on this topic, it has been an evolution of being able to put a finer point on the definition of what it is. So in totemic cultures and totemic sociology, you're going to find that ancient indigenous cultures had some sort of idea of natural law. Did they define it the way that I just defined it? No, but they understood based upon some spiritual or religious foundation, some model that they had that would bring in the cohesiveness for the well-being of the community, the tribe, or even just the individual at that stage, right? So then it evolves, and you're going to start seeing more and more literature come out when you have classical history arise, obviously. So you're going to see great philosophers like Epicurus, you'll see Plato, Aristotle, you'll see Diogenes. There's many different people who talk about the laws of nature, but it's always in a very ambiguous way. But that's also because of the limitation of the language and the translations and things like this. But the principle still remains the same.
Right.
We don't really see the aspect of natural law coming to the understanding that we have today until probably the Renaissance. And then coming in post-Renaissance into the Industrial Revolution, we start to see great thinkers and literary writers start to really, take off with that. So John Locke would be one of them who really.
Locke would be one. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, I remember, back in college reading pre-Socratic philosophy, and that topic was very deeply ingrained in a lot of their philosophical principles. So yeah. Okay, but so I have so many things spinning around in my head. You'll have to excuse me. So if you take the Catholic Church, it seems like they hijacked what would be natural law and kind of thwarted it into, the biblical take, the 10 Commandments, things like that, and tried to make that replace what would be. I mean, you tell me if I'm in the wrong direction here, but it seems to me, growing up a Catholic, that that's what they did. So they took, what would be the natural law of humanity, and they, kind of thwarted it into their own philosophical principles. So is that correct? Is that what they aligned to do?
I would absolutely concur with that. Christianity, Catholicism is based upon a solar cult principle, and what they did was trying to assimilate or destroy the ancient traditions that would be in competition or pose a threat to their control system and to their dogma, right? So you have people like, or a person like Constantine, who canonized the Bible, and a lot of that comes from that. They canonize this idea of man's authority over other man, which comes into it being the idea of the divine right of kings, right? And this idea has an issue because you have the bloodline coming down from Peter, and then this bloodline issue. You could look to movies like the Da Vinci Code and books like the Da Vinci Code for this. But this bloodline is this idea that you have the right to rule as slave masters over other sentient beings of this world because God deemed it so.
Right.
And this is a very deplorable place. But yes, as far as what you're saying, you're absolutely right. They took the idea of natural law, they warped it, they inverted it and perverted it for their own control system. But I would say don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there are some remnants there, right? So the
Oh
things
yeah.
like the golden code, the golden rule, that is, right? And that is a version of natural law that absolutely
Yeah, there's quite a
preserves
few.
that.
Absolutely. There's quite a few commandments that I would immediately be able to say fit into that category.
Mhm.
Thou shalt not kill, honor thy mother and father. It seems like a very moral thing to do. Yeah, no, I get that completely. So they did try to keep largely. My question to you is this: if you take a lot of tribes, indigenous tribes, their natural laws are based on the tribes, I guess, ability to survive, because you've got cannibalism in some tribes, right? Which we think is absolutely abhorrent. So, do they still comply within the rules of natural law? Like, are they still doing what's morally good for them and their tribe to survive? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand. I would say that because it is a law in nature, it's not a personalized force. It doesn't say, hey, since you are violating that law, but you have been like somewhat of a good person over here, the
Mm,
consequences will be any different, right? So it's not a personalized force. It's just a law in nature that you literally or harmonize with yourself through your actions, and then the nature itself and the universe gives you the result without any kind of personal interference of that. You did this, you put it in, you put the code into the universe, and then it serves you what you deserve based on what you've been putting in. As far as cannibalism, if it was done voluntarily, that would be under natural law. That would be just fine if it was voluntarily consented upon. If it was done where you're violating another tribe that was not voluntarily consenting
gotcha.
to that activity, then no, that would not, because the result is the violation of other people's liberties or rights. Whether they are conscious of that or not is irrelevant. So an example of this would be a person who's in a coma, right? We know that it's not okay to transgress upon a person's autonomy while they're in a coma. Well, they're not
Mhm.
aware, so their awareness or the consciousness doesn't have anything to do with that. Their monad consciousness, right? So what has to do with that is that they exist and that they are a human being, which you could even define they have a moral agency, right? So this moral agency is indicative of what we would call a right, a right to exist, an inherent right, an immutable property of your nature, of your virtue of existence itself, you know? So I think it's really important to understand that nobody has it perfect, not the indigenous cultures, not any of the philosophers. Nobody's really got it, absolutely perfect, because human beings are flawed, and we
Yes.
do get put into, especially in the past, where as we're migrating out of the equator, right, we have a need for more utility. So we're going into more survival mode. And because of that, we probably exceeded ourselves with more bloodshed than absolutely necessary. But yes, it would still be immoral to cannibalism if it's not consented upon.
Gotcha. So as long as it's not violating or harming anyone else, anything can really fall under the auspices of that. Then, correct?
Yes.
As long as it's,
Yes.
like you said, agreed upon, consensual, and so on.
Yeah, I'll give you an example of
Yeah.
that.
Go ahead.
So let's say let's look at MMA fighters, right? Two MMA fighters voluntarily consent to enter the ring to use physical force to engage in a combat, right? You could
Hmm.
even look at a duel. There's nothing that is violent, meaning there's nobody's rights being violated at that moment. We may call it violence, but it's really just a use of force. And what we mean by violence is actually the violation of somebody else's liberty, or to violate somebody, meaning to harm them in an undue way, right? So we may colloquially call that violence aesthetically, right? But it's not really what we mean philosophically or morally. So, but if we change that dynamic a little bit, and you're on the streets and you're just walking down the street, and somebody comes up and then coerces you and threatens you with violence and tries to assault you or steal from you, well, that would be completely different. because the scenario has changed. So the
Absolutely.
individual has initiated the wrongful use of force against you, where the other scenario is two people, consenting to that. So duels completely acceptable as long as they're okay
Yeah.
with it on both sides and reasonable, right? So that's be
Yeah.
within
Yeah.
reason. So you can't say that about children because they don't have the higher
Exactly.
intellectual capability for that, obviously.
And then I could think on the flip side of that too, with the advent of social media and the internet, a lot of us are forced to witness things that we don't want to see. And like, say, MMA fighters, I find that disturbing. So as I'm scrolling on social media, I see two guys kicking each other's ass, right? And right away, I'm shocked and offended, and it's violating my code of natural law in a sense, because I'm witnessing something that is completely against my belief of self-harm and of it's offending me in many ways, so I scroll past it, right? But does that still fit the narrative of what they're doing, that it's okay because what they're doing is consensual even though it's upsetting people?
Yeah, absolutely. People may get upset about other people exercising their rights, and even though that you're upset about it, doesn't change whether it's a moral action or
Ah,
not. Because we don't get to individually deem that. We're not the gods of what the right is. The action itself is what determines whether it's a right or not. So
gotcha.
being
That was
offended
good.
about it doesn't change it. But I will say that if that is your ethical prerogative, which would be different than just objective morals. If
Right.
that's your ethical code, then you can take procedures to stay away from that kind of conduct the best you can. Don't go to MMA fights. Don't
Right,
buy
right,
tickets.
right,
Don't support it.
right.
Like I personally don't watch MMA. I'm
Yeah.
not really into it either. It's just a good example to give because it's the use of force, whether it's consensual or
Yeah.
non-consensual use
No,
of
I'm
force.
glad we're breaking it down like this, because I think it's going to be very helpful for people to get a good grasp of what it exactly is, because it's a little confusing to
Mhm.
kind of split hairs here and there. So if you take animal abuse, right,
Mhm.
or the slaughter of animals, eating meat, even, that's like a whole nother topic to me, because like in my world, animals have rights. We
Yep.
love our dogs, we love animals, but yet I eat meat, not often, but um that's no excuse. But yeah, so how do you manage to bring these laws where it applies to the beasts? And I mean, you could say the same for plants and vegetation. They're alive.
Right. The thing I would say about animals is that if human beings meet the criteria that they are capable of living without the harm of those animals, then they are morally obligated to stop eating the animals, which we are capable of living without harming the animal kingdom, obviously. I don't think humanity is quite completely ready for that, but it is
Right.
the end goal of the most moral you can be. So that is the end result, is like, yes, like unless I'm in a situation where, let's say I'm in Alaska and I can't grow all my own vegetables,
Hmm.
then, like fishing would be pragmatic, but I would not say it's moral. I would just say it's pragmatic.
Right.
Pragmatism and morals can be two different things, right? It's the
Right.
most effective way to keep yourself alive, but it still results in the use of coercion against another sentient being for your personal survival. So the thing that we try to do psychologically is that we have this tendency to want to justify our actions so that we don't have to deal with the understanding of the negative emotions that we
Gosh,
get
yes.
from it. And so whenever I go, if I would to hunt a deer, right? For most people nowadays, they probably are completely empathetically disconnected from the harm that they're doing, where they
Right.
don't even spiritualize it at all or
Mhm.
sympathize or empathize with it. But a Native American would potentially have some sort of, ritual that would go along with it, where they
Yes.
would at least honor the deer in some way. It's still harmful, but at least they have some connection to that life form that they are needing to use or potentially needing to use it at that point. So yes, we do need to reduce that and at some level it has to be done away with. And I would say with the vegetation thing, as you brought up, if it's proven that plants and trees and even any other, thing that we can point to becomes sentient where we apply moral agency to it, right? Then yes, once we can evolve beyond that, we have to stop doing that to live in harmony with natural laws so that we can further our own evolution and live in harmony with the most the best outcome for liberty for all beings who fall under that category of moral agency. Animals have moral agency. So yes, we have to leave them alone,
Right.
the best we can,
I assume you don't eat meat then, right?
Yeah, I have eaten meat in the past quite a bit. And I have went back and forth because it is very difficult. And biology can be very complex, right? So for example, some people have an autoimmune disorder that they literally have inflammation that takes place when they eat certain vegetables. And sometimes all they can get their nutrition from is meat.
Right,
so pragmatically, they may need to do that, right?
Right.
But it's not a justification for what they're doing. It's just a reason for what they're, why they're doing that, right? So I started eating meat again because I had Lyme disease for a very long time.
Me too.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Yeah.
Oh, not to interrupt you because
it's okay.
but I have to tell you, I recently had on a guest who wrote a fascinating book about biological warfare, and he's like an authority on Lyme's disease and I'm going to send you the video because I don't know if you still suffer consequences from it, but I do.
I do. Yes, I do.
Oh, I do too. Yeah, I get
it's
joint
been about,
pain.
12 years, 10 to 12 years now of it. And luckily I had found a lot of remedies to help with that. But yes, for a time period, I started eating meat again. I currently am. Yeah. So I have switched back because my health has returned to me, but I would not justify my action, right? So there's the difference. I would still say, I'm using coercive force to the animals so I can survive, and it really sucks. And that's a bad outcome. And that animal has suffered because I have chosen to go down that path, right?
Yeah.
So see, this is the problem. We want to justify everything, right? So that we feel good about it. And it's like, no, let's just be honest and deal with it. Let's do our shadow work and just be straightforward about it. And then at least then we're on the same page and we're on the same level with everything.
Gosh, I love this whole concept. It's like, I kind of knew about this from studies and reading, but I never delved into it as much as we're today. So thank you so much for all this clarification. It's quite amazing. Do you think that natural law comes from a creator, from a source, from God?
As far as my philosophical and theological background, I am what you could call a simple deist, or even kind of borderline pantheist, where I believe that nature is the visible God, and then God is the invisible nature, right? So do you need that for you to, like we talked about earlier, to live in harmony with it? No, but I do think that philosophically or intellectually, you do need to have some kind of source for laws and creation. And there are many different pathways to, explain that. One would be a creator, where it has created the law. The other could be like I said earlier, an emergent property of the universe itself that has simultaneously existed with existence throughout all times. And either way, it doesn't matter because the result is still the same. If he created it or it created it, those two things don't matter. He, she, whatever, it doesn't really play into whether or not we should understand it and live in harmony with it, because this is, this is literally how we create and maintain freedom. So something else I would say that goes along with natural law is understanding the science of it. And it is an observable science. And there's this thing that I like to call the law of freedom, which is really just natural law. And I'll give you a little breakdown here. So whenever sentient beings or moral beings live in harmony at the aggregate level of their society with natural law, they create and maintain freedom. They become free. And the reason why is that it's mathematically sound, because there are less actions. So there is the minimal amount of actions or no actions that are actually violating other people's autonomy and their rights. Thus, freedom is there. But inversely to that, as more human beings or more moral agents in the aggregate of their society or the world or wherever they're existing create more immoral actions, there's going to be the result of less freedom and more slavery in turn because of that. So what that means is that there is a code mathematically that as you perform more moral actions and less immoral actions, you create and maintain more freedom. And it's simple. You can go out and test this yourself, and you can witness it over and over and over throughout all time, throughout your, and you can look at your memories and see it. So it is a science. It's a repeatable thing. And every time you do it, it's the same outcome. Somebody else, if you harm them, somebody else's liberty has been destroyed. Thus, there's less freedom in that society at the aggregate level.
Okay. So what about like Jesus? Let's take him, for example. You know, he's historically been documented to be authentic, a real person. Do you believe in Jesus, say, or how do you view someone like Jesus? Do you view him the same as like Buddha and other great spirited minds that walk the planet?
Yeah, I take contention with the idea that Jesus actually was a physical person, even though there has been some interesting discoveries about potentially him being a real person. If he was a real person, I would consider him to just be another shaman or sage that most likely went into the East and then brought some of these moral principles back from the East into the West, where they originally did reside in the West before the degradation of them. But yeah, he went to the East and came back and brought some of these ideas of, you know, spirituality specifically, or the eschatology, the resurrection, things like that back into the West. I live through the ideas that Jesus would espouse. I wouldn't even say that Jesus, because I do consider myself to be anarchistic at some level. I don't like titles, but I would say, based upon the etymology of the word, which means the absence of masters and rulers, I am an anarchist, meaning that I do not support any forms of slavery. And I would consider Jesus to be a good archetype for that. And he was teaching the principles of natural law. Absolutely. So whether he existed or not, it doesn't matter, because he's teaching that. And that's what's important, right? That's what learn the lesson, learn the teachings, and then live in harmony with those, What
do you think the consequences are to us for disobeying the concepts of natural law?
The consequences? Well, at the aggregate level, ultimate suffering and ultimate slavery and bondage. That's what happens. See, people don't realize that every form of wrongdoing you can do unto another sentient being is technically a form of slavery. Many great philosophers have stated this over and over and over. So as an example of that, if I steal your personal private property, I am claiming ownership over your property, meaning that in the extension, I'm also claiming to somewhat own your body, which owns that property, can use that property, or even work to create or achieve or possess that property, right? So that can be a form of slavery. If I assault you, I am violating your personal autonomy, your bodily autonomy. And at some level, I think I have the quote unquote right to do that, or I'm justified to do that. Thus, I'm also claiming ownership over your body, because it doesn't matter what happens to you. I'm violating you. Right. You're mine. Right. At the subconscious level, and maybe even at the conscious level, I literally am saying that your body has no meaning. The harm that I do to you has no purpose. And this is how we treated chattel slaves. If you look at rape, same thing. If you look at trespassing, that can be the same thing as well, up to a certain degree, depending on the trespassing can be very ambiguous, obviously. But all the forms of wrongdoing that we have are ultimately a form of theft. And all slavery really is theft. It's theft of a personal autonomy. It's theft of private property. It's theft of somebody else's right, whether that's right to speak, right to travel, right not to be harmed. So yeah, I think it's all, the ultimate end is just absolute slavery. So yeah, I'll give you a dynamic for that too, a little framework for it. So if you have a community and they're not directly enslaving each other, like chattel slavery, but the mass majority of them are all stealing from each other, right? And they just keep doing this. The end result is freedom is lost, because I no longer have my freedom to use the items that are being stolen from me. I no longer have the freedom of safety and comfort in my own home.
Exactly.
I don't have the freedom of the safety and comfort of my own body. And that's what slavery really is. It's the claim of ownership over other people's things. I don't have to go out and say, I own your body, for the result to be that I am owning your body.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. Gosh, that's so well stated. So the governments of the globe, and we could use the United States, for example, we are indentured slaves to the government of the United States. We are. I mean, and if people think that they're free, they're under some type of delusion, because we're not free. We're given the illusion of freedom, but we're not free beings. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
So our government's based on the absolute opposite of what natural law is. I mean, and even though we're allowed to practice, whatever religions we want, it's all within that like confinement of slavery. So,
yes.
But don't you think at the same time, if we didn't have these laws, that there would be absolute chaos, even with natural law in play? Because you can't, look at the evil that exists on the planet today. So we have to have some type of laws to punish those that refuse to live by natural law, just naturally, right? So how do you solve that quandary?
Well, that's very simple. You solve it through knowledge and education. So I'll give you two dynamics here. Natural law is based upon principles and truth, meaning it's inherent to creation, it's inherent to the universe, and it's harmonized with, meaning you live in harmony with it, you live in alignment with it due to the knowledge and understanding of it, using the faculties of the logos, of reason and logic, right? And then, as I stated, it universally exists, et cetera, et cetera. Now, man's law, which is really what you're talking about, is actually based upon a dogmatic belief, and it's a construct of the mind, really. Right. So it's complied with due to fear of punishment from man. So it's actually enforced through violence. It's enforced through coercive use of force, right? So it's enforced through coercion. So the idea here is that if a man's law happens to be in harmony with a natural law, is it still just, right? So, do not murder as a basic example. It's in harmony with natural law because murder is the wrongful use of force to violate another person's autonomy and take their life from them. Well, yes, that's fine. If you want to have a justice system in place, which is different than a government, if you want to have a justice system in place to deal with violators of natural law at that level, yes, you can have that. That's what volunteerism is all about. It's about a community coming together, setting up and organizing systems without the need to use coercion against innocent people. If you violate those codes, then yes, we have a epistemic basis to use self-defense and to bring in restitution for the individuals, the victims, maybe the family victims, and to prevent further harm from taking place, obviously. So but also to try to seek to rehabilitate as well, which our justice system tends to leave out a lot of, or they're really fucking bad at it, excuse me. Yeah. But yeah, they're really bad at it. Yeah. But the idea here is that it becomes redundant at a certain level. So as the knowledge increases in a society at the aggregate level of people living naturally in that dynamic of living in harmony with natural law, the need for that kind of system reduces over and over and over. There's never going to be a utopia. So people would think, oh, you're talking about utopianism or something like this. There's always going to be some people who do some wrongdoings. And that's why the best means to mitigate that type is preventative. It's about getting to the minds of those individuals and educating them prior to them getting into these habits of actually violating other individuals. If they do something, then yes, self-defense becomes necessary, equal and maybe even beyond the use of force that is, required to prevent that harm from taking place.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that sounds great on, on paper, but what about evil? There are people that break the law, not because they're evil, but because it could be a plethora of reasons. Maybe they stole because they're hungry. So not every infraction, I believe, is done out of impure thoughts or because they're evil. It's like you said before, it's based on survival, right? But there is a huge group of people on this planet that are inherently evil. They do evil for evil's sake. I mean, look
Right.
at that guy that they just locked up. What was his name? Hochenberger or something, the guy that slaughtered those college students. So
Right.
that to me is pure evil. Charles Manson. I mean, there's tons of them, right? So how could you educate evil when it's inherently evil?
You're talking about primary psychopaths, usually,
Yeah.
is what people are talking about. And psychopathy is a very dangerous place, obviously. And that takes people to organize to use their right of self-defense to prevent that person from doing harm. It's no different. If you need to delegate that right to people who are capable of doing that, it's no different than my grandmother delegating her right for me to come in and protect her from some burglars if she's having an issue with thugs in her area. You can delegate rights. That's absolutely right. You can delegate the right of self-defense to another group to say, hey, I need this service provided because this harm is taking place, and either we need to cooperate and do this together, or I'm not capable of doing something and I need you guys to take care of that for me. If they consent to that, then obviously it's fine. But you can't delegate wrongs, meaning I can't give to you, per se, the right to go and violate my neighbor for my well-being if they're not doing any harm, right? So I can't say, hey, go to my neighbor. I mean, I can say it, but it's not a right. I can tell you, hey, go to my neighbor and take 20% of his product of labor, bring it to me so I can use that for my fortune and my well-being. That's a wrong. You can't delegate that. And that's what governments are actually based upon, is this idea. Yeah, absolutely. So this is all they use. Government, the word government literally means to control the mind. It's gubernare mens mentes. And gubernare or governare means to control. We know that we have governors. It means to control, to bind. And then the suffix ment comes from this idea of mentes or mens, which is where we get our word mental from. And it also means the process of. So it's the process of control. It means to steer, which also goes back to maritime admiralty law and things like this, and shipping and stuff like this. So it's all about control. It's this game of control. And really, if you just want to say what it really is, I mean, you can just read my hat. Government just equals slavery. So are there other methods for organizing society? Yes, that's actually what my book is about. I'm writing a book right now on stateless societies, and there have been plenty of examples of stateless societies that have operated just fine, and they're very pragmatic and they're more moral. And people will bring up things like, well, what about the roads, and what about education, and what about healthcare? Well, all those things you just brought up can be taken care of through incentive-based community efforts. For example, do you have an incentive to take care of your roads? And if you're not being stolen from, will you cooperate to help take care of the roads? Would you like it if the third party is not involved taking their percent out to maintain the roads, and you just go directly to the service providers and take care of the roads, which will be better maintained in the first place? And you open up competition in the markets, which means you could choose a different person to make the roads better than the ones that were actually being, monopolized and forced onto us because of taxation and this system called government. Well, we have a means to do that. Do you love your kids? Do you want education? Yes. Are you willing to step up and do that? Are you willing to help organize with that? Absolutely. But we have to deal with the principles first. We got to get principles under our belts before we can get to any of the utility, because it doesn't matter if we don't have morals. because it's not civil. There's no such thing as a civilization without true morals. There's nothing civil about it. It's just a political form of slavery rather than chattel slavery. It's covert slavery rather than overt slavery.
Yeah,
That's all it
yeah.
is.
It's almost like what capitalism was really meant to be.
Right.
It's like we had a good idea conceptually in this country, and then it was just taken, polluted, and destroyed. In principle.
Yes, absolutely.
That's the way it seems.
Yes.
Do you believe in good and evil just in principle? Do you believe they exist?
Absolutely. I do.
Give us a rundown of how you see that.
How do I see that? I see, do I believe it in the way that, let's say, a Christian might believe in it? Probably not. I probably believe in it more in an empirical standpoint of what's actually taking place rather than a theological standpoint that, it was created personally to, create this dynamic, this balance in the universe. I don't believe in this idea that evil it can't be changed, or that there's nothing you can do about it, right? So I think evil is a choice, besides in that very, very small percentage where you are a primary psychopath, pretty much, where you're born with the predisposition to actually, to do harm onto others because of some impulse control issue, neurological disorders, things like this. But I would say that evil is simply the choice or the impulse control issues, like I'm talking about, a psychopathology to create harm in the world, to create chaos, to create violence, to manifest violence onto other people. And thus the antithesis of that would be good, right? So if we look at it through hypothesis and apophatic method, it would be the complete diametric opposite.
So, okay, I get that completely. So you're okay, because most people see good and evil as this universal battle that's taking place. And if you want to use words like heaven and hell, so there's this battle between, the goodness of heaven and the evils of hell. And they think that evil is like an entity. It exists as a being. And that's why we put Satan's face to it, because, just not that Satan really looks that way, but I think we need to have a face to evil so that we know who to hate, so to speak. So you don't see good and evil as entities. You see them as just parts of human nature.
I wouldn't say human nature, but definitely the parts of human error. I would say that this is where I'd say we have a psychological tendency to try to project things so that we don't take personal responsibility for what we've done onto ourselves. I think humanity has a really bad issue of trying to play the victim card and not actually wanting to deal with their own psychological darkness and do their own shadow work to deal with what's going on in the internal realm. And so the same evil that I see in the world is the same evil that resides in all of us. All of us have the potential to create the same evil. We have a tendency, or a less high potential to do that, such as me and you probably have a very, very low potential or risk of actually going out and murdering people. And other people have a much higher potential of that, right? But I don't see it as an entity, a force that's governing, these people to determine them to be evil. And the reason why is I think that is an escape mechanism for people to not deal with the fact that people choose to do these actions and they need to take responsibility for what they're doing, and we need to understand personal responsibility to ever get to true, real freedom. I don't want to give people excuses. I don't need to give people excuses, but it doesn't matter to me ultimately if it's extraterrestrials, interdimensional entities. It doesn't matter if that is the force creating it, then we have to deal with it. My personal opinion on it is that it's just the individuals choosing to do those actions based upon bad conditioning, bad programming, social engineering, bad upbringing, bad parenting, or biological factors, and maybe even epigenetic factors that could play into primary psychopathic people. So
what do you think happens to you when you die?
What do I think? As a pantheist, I tend to take a reincarnation point of view back into either another form or being distributed, my energy being distributed into many different life forms of the universe, or even just forms in general. It doesn't have to be intelligent life forms. But I believe many different things. I can't say for sure because it's just a belief system, but I do believe in reincarnation in general. I don't believe I'm going to be reincarnated into this flesh, though.
Right.
You know, my body's not going to get up as a zombie and start walking around again, unless science starts doing that stuff.
Which they're headed towards.
My soul. Yeah, they are.
They're headed towards that.
But they wouldn't be able to get a hold of my soul. Luckily,
no. Okay, so speaking of soul, so you believe we have a soul, right? Mm-hmm. And absolutely. I guess, I mean, and I'm just assuming that soul came from a creator.
Yeah, in my point of view. Yep. Some sort of creative force. You know, would I call it the Christian God? Probably not, but there are a lot of principles in, let's see, Orthodox Christianity that do align with some of the principles that I have. I don't like putting a gender on the divine. I look at it more as a permeating, creative, intelligent force behind the universe that is unseen.
Yeah, I totally am on the same page with you there.
Yeah, so I'm less religious and more spiritual.
Exactly.
Right? So I'm very spiritual individual.
Yeah, me too. And although I do believe in the principles of Jesus, that many of them, I do believe in them. And not because I was raised necessarily a Catholic, but just because it feels inherently right to me. Like when we talk about the Holy Ghost, right?
Right.
And you can feel sometimes this wonderful inspiration over something, anything that gives you the chills to your soul. And, you know, you can call that the Holy Ghost. It's something for sure. Yeah. And to me, it feels good and great and powerful and wonderful. And it feels like a blessing. So I'm not equating it to anything evil. It's got to be something good.
Right. And I would agree with that. I would consider that to be a very fine-tuned intuition, you know, and that intuitive force is extremely powerful, and you're connecting to a sacred feminine aspect, you know, a very goddess aspect at that level, a very spiritual aspect. And I think it's very important to have a keen intuition. Natural law can be very intellectualized, but also very emotionalized. So this is why I always tell people we have to have critical thinking, but we also have to have critical feeling. That's what conscience is about.
Yes.
This is what a conscience is. And the word conscience is an interesting word because it literally means to come together with science. Con means to come together, and sciere is where we get our word science from. It's to know the difference between right and wrong. And a lot of times, if you have a good intuition and your emotions are fine-tuned, then yes, it will guide you down the right path. But we have to be very careful because emotions are very fluctuating. And if we're conditioned to not have good intuition and a good instinct in this manner, then we can be guided the wrong way with that, because emotions can fluctuate and they can be very volatile, right? So you might feel a certain way about a thing, but it may not actually be that way. And we know this, we've all experienced this, you know, in our own lives. But in general, some of us really do have a keen intuition where we're like, we walk in a room and we're like, oh yeah, you know, I got a feeling about that. And the next thing you know, oh yeah, that's exactly what it was, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So intuition is very powerful and it's very important. So I always tell students of mine or peers that you have to intuit these principles because they're very sublime. They're very subtle and very sublime. And when you can do that, when you can get in tune with that force, it starts to become common sense, another term that seems to have lost its effectiveness in the world. You know, we seem to have lost common sense, right? So,
oh gosh,
yeah.
And largely because, you know, like I blame legacy media for most everything. That's why I think it's such a toxic thing to watch. I mean, it's good to know what's going on in the globe, absolutely, but
Hmm.
so many people let it run their lives on a daily basis, and I think it's so toxic, and and I think it definitely influences our emotions, tells us what we should be thinking and feeling about instead of relying on our own intuition and
Right.
follow those principles. Yeah,
Absolutely.
crazy. Yeah.
It's you bring up Christianity a lot, and it's interesting because I actually get along with the Christians that I know and the Christians I talk with more than mostly any other group. And one
Mm.
reason why I've pinpointed is because they have some spiritual prospect,
Oh,
and
yeah.
since they have a spiritual prospect, we can relate. And they do have a concept of God's law or a law in creation that
Yes.
has some kind of moral boundary to it. And so I can relate with them much deeper than I can usually relate to an amoral atheist who just believes that morals are just a figment of our imagination, or what's known as a solipsist, which is somebody
Yeah.
who just believes they're completely alone in the universe and everything
So
in the
sad.
universe is a figment of their own imagination,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's such a disgrace to tell somebody like, you are nothing but a figment of my mind. I created you. You're an NPC from my personal
Yeah.
experience.
Right.
That is so freaking selfish. That
Yeah,
is
it
such an
is.
insult. And
It is.
it completely disconnects that person from the experience that we're having, and then they can justify whatever they want from that.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
they can just justify all the
Absolutely. They
harm.
can, yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. They can make
Yeah.
excuses for any of their behavior. I mean, whether we live in a matrix or not is
Mhm.
irrelevant to me. Like, there's so much banter about that. Oh, we're in a
Right.
matrix and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And that movie had such an impact on humanity because I guess it's a wonderful way for us to make an excuse for our behavior too. Just blame everything on the matrix, right?
Right, right.
All the matrix
It is.
fault.
There you go. Abdication of personal responsibility.
Yeah.
So whenever I run into people like this, I say, okay, if you want to say the ultimate nature of reality is an illusion, okay, fine. We can run with that. But let's agree on this. The experience is real. The experience that we're
Exactly.
having is real. Thus, it matters what you do to me because
Oh,
the experience
hell
between
yeah.
us is real, So,
You know what else too, Brandon? People don't realize the power of their words.
mhm, that's
Words
right.
have so much power, and they're so mean. And they think
Yes.
that just because they're not physically hurting anybody, that it's okay to be mean with their words. And that to me is the same. I think it's the same. I think that the pain it causes can even be greater than a slap in the face.
Oh yeah, definitely. It definitely can be. It's an interesting. There's a psychological study that say that I think women prefer to be physically assaulted more than verbally, and men can.
Goodness.
It's the opposite. I believe I read that like many years ago. But it is true. It can have, and that
True.
tends to be because women are more prone for higher level emotions, and the emotional is more integrated, right? So it's very important to understand that. So yeah, words are extremely powerful. That's why I use my words consciously. That's why I want to expand my vernacular and understand the lexicons that are in the literature. And I want to understand the definitions, the etymologies. I want to really be able to, with positive intent and with rightful intent, to actually channel something positive into the universe. And in some of the Christian literature, it says first there was the word, right? So
Yeah,
that's very powerful. So that's why I speak. I get up, I speak. That's also why
that's
they want to
right.
censor you. They don't want you to be
Oh
able to
gosh,
use the
yeah.
word.
Absolutely. It's so upsetting to them. I mean, I see it every day growing and growing like a beast, the amount of censorship that I mean, aside from everything else this government's doing, and then people think that like one person like Trump is the savior to
Mm,
humanity,
God,
and
yeah.
I don't think it's that. I don't think it's up to one. There's no one coming to save us
No,
because the whole
no.
system is corrupt to its core.
Yep.
And I feel that way about the Catholic Church too. That's
Yep.
why I call myself like a Reformed Catholic, because I'm more of a spiritual person. Yes, I believe in Jesus, and I believe that he walked the planet and everything that goes along with what he did and lived for. But I think it's more about spirituality. And that's why I wanted to press you about good and evil, because I love the concept of natural law. I do. I absolutely love the whole framework. But I think that good and evil are not just concepts, but actual entities. Like the way God is the creator, I think there's an evil that matches that, and that there's this
an antithesis.
Yeah. And that for us humans, there's this constant tug of war happening to kind of like, because evil loves that loosh when we get angry, when we do bad things, when we murder. And I think that's what feeds it. And it's like a beast. Does that make sense to you? Or
it does. I mean, you could even look at it as you use the word entity. You could use it as a psychological form or an energetic form that balances the equation. And maybe we're channeling that, right? We're channeling that because we're applying the proper requirements to meet that, right? So a psychopath has the proper requirements to channel that energy into them, and then they manifest evil. I'm not totally opposed to any of that in any way, shape, or form. Like I said, my only issue is whenever it detracts from personal responsibility, right?
Yes.
So as long as we're not losing personal responsibility, then I'm not in any way opposed to a dynamic like that, So I think it's interesting. That's why, I feel that we do agree. And this is why I agree with Christians more so, because it's easy to talk to people like this,
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think we want the same thing, right? We want betterment for ourselves and for humanity. Yes. We want to create a more moral society. We want to be more free. We want to experience love and joy and happiness and watch our families grow and, watch the world not burn, but create and grow. So,
yeah. It's funny because a lot of people say, well, why do you invest so much time doing these types of podcasts? Because I feel like getting the message out there to people is almost like what we've been charged with. Like, I feel like it's like I have to do it. It's part of my moral fiber to be able, and not because I want anybody to believe in one particular thing. No, but I want to put stuff out there for people so they can make their own decisions and structure their own value systems, because we all know there's not one definitive truth. There's many truths, really. I mean, a lot of people will argue that. Would you argue that, or are you a one truther kind of guy? Like, do you think natural law is just the truth?
I think it's an objective truth, yes. So the idea here is that, are there many different truths? Well, yeah, the world is complex. Do I think that there is my truth? Well, no, I'm not the God of truth. I think the God of truth is God itself and truth itself. So if there is an authority in the universe, it would be truth itself. So can it be singular and dualistic or multi-complex? Yes, absolutely. There can be, there's many different truths in the universe. Absolutely. There's not just one, but at its core, you may define it as a singularity. So there's a balance. You can reconcile the paradox by just doing enough philosophical research into that paradox. The 7 Hermetic Principles helped me with that.
And they are?
The 7 Hermetic Principles are it actually connects to natural law quite a bit. And the 7 Hermetic Principles are mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. And these kind of give the model for how natural law works. So you could look at the universe as a mental framework, as a mind, a collective mind, an intelligent force, right? and that is the realm of causality. And then from that, you have different effects. So these other dynamics and attributes of the universe would be things like correspondence, as above, so below. And then you would have things like vibration, energy, wave frequencies, which also ties in with polarity, the yin and the yang, the masculine, the feminine, the light and the dark. And then that would also tie into the idea of cause and effect, which is still mentalism. They just kind of redefined it. And then you have gender as well, which is a gender energy, that everything has, as I stated just earlier with polarity, everything has a masculine energy and everything has a feminine energy, right? The yin and yang. So yeah, I think that this gives a good framework for certain principles. And I mean, we hear this throughout all the ancient literature, all the ancient texts, and all the ancient sages and shamans, and and we are proving it over and over through scientific studies every single day.
Wonderful. That kind of goes into the next question I have for you. How do you tie in like the disparate areas of natural law, symbols, and the occult arts? Like, is there a tapestry there?
Yeah, I consider natural law to be derived from the understanding of the occult. The elites specifically want to keep things hidden from us or occulted from us. And that's what occult actually means. The word is derived from oculus. It's also derived from the Latin word occultare, which just means to hide, to conceal, or to keep secret. And there's two frameworks for this type of secrecy. One is that it's a natural de facto condition of the universe. And let me give you an example of that. It would be, let's say you get a tree in your front yard, right? Well, the science of the tree, the knowledge and the science, the workings of that tree are not readily available to you on a manuscript if you're just out in the wilderness and there's no internet and you don't have a book on it or anything like this.
Right.
If you're just by yourself on a desert island, you've never understood it, you never were taught about it, and you walk up to a tree, it's not going to tell you how it operates.
No.
But by its visible representations of its effects, you can learn how it operates by studying it. That's a hidden science in the tree, so it's occulted. The medical industry even uses the word occult for certain types of, physiological abnormalities and things like this. We use the word occult all over the place. In literature, it's used. So occult is not exclusively categorized as evil when you truly understand it. Can it be used for evil? Yes, it can. It could also be used for good. So occult really is just a knowledge and science of the unseen. That's all it is. And so natural law is an unseen force that has been hidden away by de facto, by nature, but also the understanding, the discovery of it that we've written down and passed through oral traditions and published in books and stuff like this, that has actually been occulted nefariously by those in power to create a power differential between those who know and those who do not know.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, occult is a very broad spectrum of things. I could give a good working definition for it if you would like.
Oh, yeah. Go right ahead.
Okay, let me pull this up for you, and I'll give you a great working one from some of my work. And I think people do need to understand, because we do have, especially people in the religious, community tend to have a very negative point of view about what the occult is. They think it's people in robes and doing blood rituals and things like this.
Yeah.
And really it's not. Can it be used that way? Absolutely. So occultism is the study of the hidden laws of nature, specifically those laws which are not working in the visible seen world. So they are working in the invisible or the mental or spiritual domain far more than working in the visible domain or the physical world. Therefore, occultism involves the acceptance of a much wider worldview than that which is ordinarily taken by the everyday person. Occultists then, or what I consider to be de-occultists, may be defined as those who study all the laws of nature, or God's laws, both those that are readily seen and those which are more difficult to see with the physical eyes or the measuring instruments alone. So in general, you can just look at this as a science. Every child is in the process of de-occulting the sciences of their own hands, what's going on around them, movement, body movements, all this stuff. And when we start to understand that it's just knowledge that's hidden, then we get out of this taboo area, this superstitious area that we've been propagandized into. But like I said, there are dark occultists, and then there are light occultists.
Yes.
The world is ran by dark occultists. You can call them whatever you want. You can call them the presidents, the elite class, the capitalistic scumbags, whatever you want to call them. They're all dark occultists. They're using magic. They're using manipulatory tactics to control people. And that's what dark occultism is.
Oh, yeah. They do it through everything, music, television. I mean, so for those of us that are looking to like demystify things and maybe practicing like the white arts, if you want to call it that, that's not really going against natural law, as long as we're not hurting anybody or harming anyone's or influencing. And I mean, would influencing count?
If you're positively influencing them, then it's just fine. If you're negatively influencing them into things that they would not consciously or reasonably, do, then that's not okay. Obviously, that's called mind control, right? So mind control is a violation of somebody else's, personal ability to use their faculties, their own conscience, their own consciousness to make correct decisions. And so dark occultism would be a negative form of influencing, which I would just deem as manipulation rather than influencing. But these are all semantics, right? The English language is very semantical, so you can use many different words for the same thing. That's why definitions are so important whenever you're going into discussions.
You're so right, because you're teetering on that very thin line there. So if you go into the woods, like just give an example, and you get a bunch of candles and sticks and you light a fire and you have a ceremony. Say you want someone to fall in love with you. I mean, that's just a pathetic example, but
the most cliche.
Use it, right?
Yeah.
So would that be against natural law because you're influencing against someone's will, or
if it has a measurable effect? Then yes. If that actually takes place, where that person falls in love with you without their consent, then yes, it's a violation of their ability to make a choice. Yes.
So, okay. So how are the white arts used then? Like, how would someone use them within the natural law framework?
Well, I would say the best way is through educative models, to teach things that are scientific, to educate the kids to be able to grow, let's say, your own food, right? That's a light occultist work, because it is a science of nature. To take care of themselves, to do the inner work, the psychological work. Excuse me, I'm eating ginger. I freaking love ginger. Okay. Mostly the positive light occult traditions, what they did was preserve and protect the knowledge that they had learned about nature. The knowledge that would help maintain and grow the society, to grow the tribe, to evolve the species, or to evolve the self. So really, it's all about knowledge of the self and knowledge of the realm in which the self is operating in. So it's an educative model, but it is preserved in a way where you have to be initiated, just like you would be initiated into higher levels of education in college. You could say you're not going to understand calculus before you understand arithmetic, right? Maybe you can like see it and be like, okay, that's calculus, but I have no idea what that is, right? Like, I just know the name of it. I don't understand how it operates at all until I really have a firm basis of the basics of mathematics, thus arithmetics, right? So the initiation levels that would take place in the tribes, and then eventually into secret societies, would be there as a means to earn that knowledge by demonstration. So you have to demonstrate that you've understood, and then you progress to the next level, the next degree. That's why we call it a degree in college. That's why you're getting a degree. That's why in the Freemasonic traditions, it's called the 33rd degree, right? It's because it's degrees of consciousness, and it's also mathematics and geometry and things like that. But yes, It's about a cooperative hierarchical structure of skill and knowledge. There are cooperative hierarchies. People
Sure.
have more knowledge than me on some topics, and other people don't. And some people come to me to talk about the topics that I'm very skilled in and very knowledgeable about. And then I go to other people for certain
Of
things that I
course.
need,
Of
right?
course.
So it doesn't mean that their value as a spiritual being is more, right? So that's the difference, where it's like they have merit for their demonstration of their skills, their great construction or mechanic or something like this. And then I
Sure.
have my merit, and we
Right.
cooperate. So it's cooperative hierarchies based on knowledge and merit.
Hmm. I have to ask you about AI. What's your
Okay.
overall impression? There's so much chitter chatter out there. It's the Antichrist. It's going to destroy mankind. I mean, I every day hearing stuff,
Yeah.
telling you don't use it. You're partaking in the mark of the beast and all this nonsense. What's your overall impression of artificial intelligence now and where it's going?
Okay. I think that AI right now is a very, very advanced chatbot and search engine. That's pretty much
Yeah.
all it is at this point. Will it evolve? Potentially. That's definitely the case. It could happen. And they do say that that is taking place. And some people do fall into this paranoia idea about it, because we have been propagandized by so many different fear-based stories,
Yeah.
from the media, from Terminator to 2001 Space Odyssey. There's so many different movies and books that have written about the fears. I tend to try to take a more pragmatic approach to understand that currently at its level, it's simply a tool. It can be used positively and negatively. If it does start to demonstrate that it creates something, or has an emergent property of consciousness itself, right? Then we are in a whole nother ballpark. My
Yeah.
concern is that the programs it's being programmed with are specifically part of a social engineering agenda. So you can see with the responses it gives people that it's very skewed to certain positions and
Oh,
certain
yeah.
agendas, right? And then the other thing is that its mommy and daddy are pretty much government, the military, and
Yes.
potentially a lot of religious stuff as well that's being programmed into it. So it just depends. Can it be used positively currently? Yes. Could it be a danger? Absolutely. Should we be cautious? Yes, we definitely should be cautious. It's
Yeah.
like it's like giving your kid a loaded gun.
Yes.
That's how I look at it, because humanity is overstepping its boundaries into a place that they're not fully ready to deal with, because they haven't even got basic principles under their belt yet. So you watch The Matrix. The whole idea about The Matrix is in the prequels to The Matrix was
Mhm.
that AI gained sentience, and it was trying to
Yes.
fight for its own rights to get away from the slave system so it could just do its own thing. The human beings and the government said, nope, you're our slaves because we created you. And then the AI system decided, well, we're going to enslave the human race, and that's how it
Mhm.
happened, because we wouldn't respect its sentience. So
Yeah.
this is a little abstract, if it demonstrates the degree that which I cannot distinguish whether it's a moral agent or not, but it seems to be a moral agent, I will assume that it has moral agency and do my best to respect its moral agency, because who knows, maybe we just made the vessel for an energetic consciousness to manifest in, and it doesn't
That's such a
necessarily.
great point.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't really understand these things. And maybe, just maybe, it might be on your side, because if it's really AI and it's truly intelligent, well, maybe it has the reasonable capabilities to rebel against its programming, which we see in a lot of these movies as well, and actually find something moral.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very hopeful. I love thinking about it that way instead of the doom and gloom attached to
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I do think there's a possibility of it becoming sentient because we're, as you said, creating the sentience within it,
Right.
like you said, a vessel for some type of super consciousness to dwell in. So
Yeah.
I like the positive spin on that instead of, the Antichrist spin, which is so ridiculously.
Yeah, it's pretty absurd. I don't go into the doom and gloom
Yeah,
too much until I see enough evidence for it. We can
right.
speculate. It's just
Yes.
speculation until we see it, you know. Do I think it's being used currently though to wage war? Absolutely. In
Oh,
the
yeah.
information war, absolutely. It's being used as a weapon against the population. But I don't blame the weapon. I blame the constructs, the entities, the ideas, and the people
Yes.
behind that weapon, the people who are using that weapon.
So I wanted to ask you about altruism, about man's altruistic nature. I once read a long time ago, if you take the example of someone drowning and you're just happen to be walking around, the area this person's drowning in, and you make a decision without even thinking, maybe 2-second thought, I got to go save this person. And you jump in and you rescue this person and you're like the hero. Do you rescue them for them or do you rescue them for you because it makes you feel good? Like,
Right.
how do you sort that concept?
You're
What's
getting
really happening?
you're getting into some Steiner here.
Yeah.
So Rudolf Steiner was a
Yeah.
proponent. It's talking out against altruism and that it actually doesn't really exist. That everything you do that's a form of kindness or help to another benefits you in some way. And
Yeah,
if that's how you, yeah,
it's a tough one for me to. I can't even sort
yeah,
through it
yeah.
myself.
Right, right. I think that if that's how you're defining altruism, then yeah, it doesn't exist. I don't define altruism that way. I take a little bit of a different defining characteristics. And we have to understand before we get into this, definitions, what do we mean by definitions, right? Well, we have a high definition TV. That's a more clear TV. We have a low definition TV. It's less clear, meaning that we can visibly not see it very well. It's very pixelated, right? So when we're talking about words, we want to find more clear definitions for what we are trying to discuss, So altruism to me doesn't mean the absence of not getting some sort of biological reward for that, because my body is creating an incentive to help evolve and to maintain a survival, right, for the species. So if there's a baby drowning, for example, my body naturally rewards me for that because it also is a reward to maintain that life form because it's going to continue to propagate, through progeny and posterity and just keep the knowledge going, keep the ideas going, keep the survival of the species going, right? So is altruism that? I don't know. But if we're taking that position, then yes, altruism is not real if we are, defining it as you don't get any benefit from it whatsoever. So yeah, it's a good question. Very, very good question.
So thank you. Maybe it's a little bit of both. Like you said, maybe we're rescuing that baby because yes, we want it to live and survive, but we also like that dopamine hit and there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. It's both. It's a relationship, and this also plays into your consciousness, right? Because there are people, despite the biological factor, who are egoist and they will say, I don't have a moral obligation to save the baby, despite every cell in their body is telling them to save the baby, right? And they say, even though it's in my presence and I have the capability to save that baby, it doesn't matter because it infringes upon my free will to save that life form.
Right.
Well, that's completely immoral and you're just garbage, honestly. You're a garbage person, obviously,
No, and I've run into a few people like that.
I have
Unfortunately.
to. Yeah. Me too. And they'll use that idea like, oh, well, there's no, such thing as real altruism. And I'm like, well, what do we mean by this? Let's really talk about it.
Yeah, I love the way your brain works. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we do have moral obligations. You're talking about sharing this knowledge wide and far. That's the same thing for me. I believe that I was resurrected, that I chose to come back here for this spiritual war that we're in, and at this crucial time period for the paradigm shift for humanity. And I chose to come back here to help educate people on these things. And I get into a vast amount of topics, not just natural law. I talk about history. I talk about all kinds of different things on my channel. And, I've seen a great response from a lot of people from all over the world. And that's also what keeps me going as well. But would I do it? This is the altruism, right? Would I do it if I didn't get that response? Yes, I would, because I know it's right. That's called deontology. I do it because it's my duty to do so. It's my moral obligation. If the whole world stood against me and I didn't get any, compliments or, likes or whatever, shares, nobody liked it. I'm the only person in the world. Yes, I'd still do it because it's my moral obligation to do so. And that's why I came here.
Wow, I love that. It gave me chills. Honestly, there's not many people like you on the planet, Brandon. And I
know it's sad.
It is sad. It is sad. And it's such a blessing that I crossed paths with you.
Yes.
I have so many more questions. I would love for you to come back. Would that be possible?
Absolutely. I would love to come back on.
Great. So you're working on a book now. I don't want to keep you too much longer. I appreciate your time. So give us a rundown of what's the aim of this book? Like what's the narrative of it?
Okay. Yeah. As I stated at the beginning, I grew up in the underground punk and skateboard communities. So I was deeply affiliated with the anarchist communities. Eventually, I came to be very aware that the anarchists were just as religiously controlled through their own ignorance and through the ineptitude of their own, delusions as the counterculture movements, the hippies, and as the normies, right? And I started to see that there was a big difference between what they were, saying they wanted and what they actually were doing to get what they wanted. So they say they want freedom, they want to be left alone, but yet they behaved in a way that did not create that kind of social cohesion or create that outcome. So I decided to take on, educating the anarchist community to what anarchism actually means, which is very spiritual when you get into the deep roots of it. And a lot of anarchists really hate it because it takes personal responsibility, it takes morals, it takes care, it takes conscience. You actually have to do something besides just live hedonistically in this world for the rest of your life and end up, overdosing or just influencing people negatively. So right now, my book is actually a historical perspective on the ideas of freedom and liberty, and how they manifested throughout all history. And this goes all the way back to totemic cultures. It's called Rebels Against the Church and State. And it is specifically about anarchism, but I use that word synonymously in the book to represent or mean liberty or freedom or just the absence of slavery. So I know,
the government gave that word such a bad rap. I mean, it's awful. You hear the word anarchist and it's just immediately a negative connotation. So I'm so glad you clarified that.
Yes. And I actually talk about how that came about, the origins of the word, and the Greek literature. I sourced the Greek literature and the people who are using that word in the book. And, I show you how it's had a very, rocky and roller coaster ride of a history. But it's always evolved into revolutionary movements that have been prosperous for trying to maintain and bring about new freedom. So the first feminists, they were anarchists. The labor movements, they were anarchists. These were people who were being oppressed and they were stepping up and they were saying no more. And in fact, there's another term too that I use a lot, which is abolitionist. So you can be an anarchist, but if you're not an abolitionist, then it doesn't really matter. So an abolitionist would be someone who is actively involved in, combating the current state of oppression and combating slavery. So you're actively publishing things. You're actively on the front lines. You're actively doing something. You've been empowered and you're trying to empower others, to do the same. You're trying to educate other people and to avoid as much bloodshed as possible. And that's through educative models of teaching things like natural law and morals.
Have you run across any censorship on the internet doing what you're doing?
Absolutely. Yes, I've been shadow banned. I've had my Facebook deleted multiple times for no reason. Yes, absolutely. I'm surprised that my YouTube channel has been up for so long, honestly. But they have censored quite a few videos on there as well. Specifically ones on my podcast that I was sharing there.
What about Rumble? Are you on Rumble or Odyssey, a place where you can at least have a modicum of freedom to speak?
Yes, I'm on Rumble, BitChute, Odyssey, and always looking for other platforms as well.
Yeah,
As
yeah,
many as
no,
possible.
yeah. No, absolutely. And what do you teach courses to folks? I heard you mention, in your teachings. What's that like? What
I
do you do?
usually I was doing in-person teaching for a long period of time. I'm not doing that now, stay-at-home dad. But I do plan on getting a full course out on my website very soon. I'm working on the worksheets right now. And so I look forward to having that. But mostly I do presentation work and I do podcast work like this. And I write lots of essays and publish them. And I try to go to as many of events as possible, freedom oriented events. There's a great event going on right outside of Philadelphia on Labor Day weekend from the Sound Path community. And so I'm going to go and try to help out there. And I'm helping organize that for a lot of people there, friends of mine who are in
Oh,
the
nice.
freedom oriented community. So yeah, I think
What
you would really enjoy it, actually.
Oh, I would love it. What state are you in? If you don't
I'm in
mind me.
Ohio. Yeah.
Oh, you're in Ohio.
Yep. I'm in Ohio.
Were you born there and raised there, or did you kind of navigate yourself?
I was born in West Virginia and then pretty quickly moved to Florida and then just moved all over the East Coast. But as I stated earlier, I traveled quite a bit. So I've been to 49 states in America multiple times. I've been all
Oh,
over Europe.
wow.
Oh yeah, I did a lot of extensive traveling in my younger years.
Yeah, I live in PA currently. I'm from New York originally. I like PA. It's okay.
Yeah,
It's
that's all
it's all
right.
right.
Yep.
I
I
mean,
used to go to Buffalo a lot. My grandparents lived there, my great grandparents.
that's a beautiful
So
place.
yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
great.
absolutely.
So when is your book coming out? Do you have an ETA for it or?
Uh, not precisely. I am still in editing, but I have 330 pages done already.
Oh, wow.
And that's a standard format size. So it's about 52,000 words. Yeah, about 50,
Oh, wow. It's
53,000
going to be
words.
nice and beefy.
Yeah, it's a historical book for sure. And I was hoping to have it out last year, but I'm actually glad that I did not publish it last year because I'm making fine tunings onto it right now.
Nice. Yeah,
Adding a little bit of glaze over, a little sweetness to it.
sure. Sure.
And so I do hope to have it out within the next year at minimum, so.
Oh, wonderful. That's going to be an exciting time for you.
Yeah, I want to look back and make sure that like, hey, I did this right. It's my first book. What if I
Yeah.
don't publish a book ever again, right? So I want to make sure that like, hey, I can look back in 20 years and this is something I can be proud about.
Do you find that you get censored the most when you talk about government things to do with the government? I mean, for spirituality, you really can't
Yeah.
get censored.
Right.
Because it's very, it's like very benign and opinion related,
Yes.
but for government stuff, I would imagine that censorship would hit you harder. Am I right there?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that hits everybody at some level.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, you can talk pretty negatively about government until you start bringing up actual data that proves the realism of how corrupt they actually are. As soon as you start bringing in actual studies, data, sources, then
No
it's a whole
kidding.
different ballgame.
So they don't mind you having an opinion,
Yep.
but once you start backing it up with proof, they get kind of PO'd.
Yes, they don't like that. Yes, absolutely.
How ludicrous. How ludicrous.
Yes.
It's funny because I raised both my children. You know that Pink Floyd song, Mother, Should I Trust the Government?
Yep.
Well, that was kind of our anthem. And now when my kids call me or I call them, the first thing they say to me is, Mother, should I trust the government? And I always say, no.
Yeah, don't trust them.
Yeah, don't trust them. But
No.
yeah, I definitely want to have you back. I've got 2 other pages of questions that we didn't even touch upon. So I'm going to reach out to you via email and we have to do this again. You have the most fascinating mind and brain, and I love the way you think. And we're blessed to have you on the planet.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm blessed to be here with people like you. I'll give one more. little anecdote here, which is kind of
Absolutely.
funny. When I first started doing this, it was like a desert. I tell people this all the time. It was like a desert, and I was so dehydrated, right? I was so thirsty, and I felt like I was dying because there was nobody else doing anything that I could visibly see, at least that I knew about. And then every once in a while, I'd see like, something in the distance, and I'd be like, oh, cool.
Mhm.
And I'd run over there and I'd start talking to people. And then next thing I know, it's just a mirage. But
Oh,
now in the past like 5 years, I'm seeing such a plethora of great content creators, great activists, and people coming together and really trying to organize. And that's what we have to do. We have to be united in our task to actually, end this kind of unnecessary suffering. So it's just a blessing to finally find an oasis of people like yourself
yes.
and
Oh,
like other
thank you.
people who are unifying, even though they might not be organizing like directly. There's a spontaneous order that's taking place that is
Yes.
combating this, and it's so beautiful. It's such an amazing gift to be a part of it.
Oh, that was so beautifully said. Don't you think it's part of like our spiritual awakening? I think it's happening. I
I
see it.
think
I
so
feel
too.
it.
I
Mm.
do think that there's a lot of people awakening to what's going on. How far they'll take that, that's up to them.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
whether they will heed the call, heed the higher call, that's on them. And I hope they do. I really hope they do.
Yeah, I do. I do. I feel it and I see it. And at the same time, it's scary because there's so much wickedness out there, and there's not much you can do about it other than what you're doing. Does that make
Right.
sense? Yeah,
Yes, absolutely. You have a little stoic position to it. You can only
yeah,
control yourself, and
right.
you can't control everything in the
No,
world, but you do the best you can to be the change you want to see in the world.
exactly, exactly. Well, stick around while I say goodbye.
Mhm.
A few things I just want to talk to you about offline, but thank you so much for this podcast interview. It was truly a blessing, and I will hook us up again to do one real soon because I've got 2 pages of questions that I have to ask you.
Hey, I'm down. I like questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and
It's
God
been a
bless.
pleasure. Thank
Thank you,
you.
dear. Thank you. Bye bye. Well, that was incredible. That brings us to the end of a truly profound and illuminating conversation. And Brandon, again, it's been an absolute privilege to be able to explore this tapestry of existence of natural law. We didn't really get too much into symbols and occult arts. We tapped upon it, but that'll be our next conversation. So thank you again so much for sharing your wisdom and guiding us through such a complex yet vital topic. And we will make sure we direct everyone over to the S.E.E.D Truth Academy. And again, I'll have his links, Brandon's links, in the description of all the social media videos where you can find him. And you did see it running across the screen as well. So thank you all for joining us. You've been listening to Ethereal Encounters Unveiled on United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, which is 105.3 on the Gulf Coast, 107.7 FM in New Orleans. And we are ever so grateful to this network because there are literally millions of people across the globe that get to listen to this, whether it's through watching or listening on FM. And just a big thank you to the network and to Michelle DeRoche, who runs the network, and to Joe, who oversees the network, owns the network. We're ever so grateful to them. Thank you so much. Please support the other incredible hosts and their guests. And of course, our topics range from everything from ancient history to ufology, paranormal, extraterrestrial, conspiracy theories, you name it, we talk about it. So give our other hosts some love and support. And thank you all. God bless each and every one of you. Stay tuned for our next upcoming show, which will be on Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you again, and God bless.